And first off, what plans do you have to put across a more positive image about EU to the public than they currently get from the press? So in short, how can we sell us on the doorstep? And if we go up first with Bauna, please.
Sure. I think what we need to actually do is get out there, not just on the doorstep, but in the community as well, and start having the conversation about the EU and not focusing on the negatives that people like to focus on, which, you know, it always goes back down to immigration. And actually, when people talk about immigration, it isn't necessarily EU immigration they're talking about anyway. I think if I give you an example of the sort of conversation I think we should be having is, I'll take back to my window cleaner who actually works in Stevenage. And he said to me the other week, he said, oh, you know, how's the election stuff going? And I said to him, yeah, it's going really well, you know, go for Europeans this time round. And he said to me, you know, I'm a Labour supporter, but I'm going to vote for UKIP. So I said to him, do you know what, Andy, why are you going to vote for UKIP? And he was like, well, you know, all this immigration and all the money that Europe takes away from us, blah, de blah, de blah. And I said to him, do they really take your job away? I said, you're a window cleaner. He went, yeah, you got a point there. And I said, but I said, shall I tell you something? I said, do you know why we shouldn't be leaving the EU? And he went, why? And he says, I said to him, how would you feel if I told you that everything's going to become more expensive? And he went, really? He went, how come? I said, well, you know what? Nobody's going to actually trade with us. And that is the sort of message that we have to be giving to people on the doorstep, which is all the positive things that the EU actually brings us. It brings us trade, it brings us good employment rights that we would not have had it not been for the EU. It brings, you know, a diversity to this country. It brings us grants. There are so many EU-funded regional projects in this region that has happened because of Europe. And it's a positive message I think we need to be delivering. But at the same time, if the immigration question comes up, I think we have to address it as well. The European elections are the only time when it doesn't matter where you live, but your Labour vote will matter, and it counts. Now, I can live in North Hertfordshire. My vote is going to matter for that time. And that's where I have to say I disagree that we don't have that conversation about UKIP on the doorstep. Because there is a danger that if we don't do that, there are people actually, even in our own party, our own supporters, who are saying that they're going to vote UKIP purely because they don't understand the role that the EU plays in terms of, you know, trade and all the positive stuff. So I think that's what we have to do, is combat and have that, you know, listen to people's concerns. Because one of the actual criticisms of the last general election was that we didn't actually talk to people about immigration. And I think once people have aired their concerns, then they are more likely to actually then listen to the rebuttal that we are obviously going to be giving. And I just want to remind everybody as well is that the European elections are very, very important next year, because they are going to be the springboard into the 2015 general election. And if we do not get our Labour vote out next year, there is a danger that we are not going to get that Labour vote out in 2015, and the only way we can kick the bloody Tories out is by winning in 2015, because otherwise there's no point in having Labour MEPs in Europe if we've still got Tory MPs in Westminster.
Generally speaking, apart from general elections, turnout to votes to local elections, the police crime commissioner can be bad, and it'd be reasonable to say that the MEP elections may have a low turnout, and that always hits the Labour vote in terms of it's quite a lot of the time it's the Labour voters that stay at home. What will you do as the Labour representatives in these elections to get people to come out to vote and to come out to vote for Labour?
I have to say that a lot of what Chris said I agreed with. I think one of the main things that we're going to have to do, because, you know, the six of us cannot go and physically talk to 6 million constituents that live in the east of England, is to build relationships with local parties and activists. Next year's elections are May the 22nd, which are going to be on the same day as the local elections. And that's where, you know, we are going to be relying on local council candidates as well to fly the flag for Europe. So it's not just European election day, it's district council election day as well. And when they're flying the flag for Europe, I think people just need to be reminded that, yes, Europe isn't perfect. I don't say it's perfect. One of the reasons I'm getting involved as well, because I think there's reforms are to be made. But the only way that people are going to see positive reforms in Europe is by electing more Labour MEPs. The more of us there are, we can work with our sister parties to actually bring, good things back to the East of England and back to the UK. Whereas if people do have that protest vote and don't turn out and don't go and vote, then all that's going to happen is we're going to have potentially two parties, UKIP and Tory MEPs elected, who actually don't really give a stuff about Europe, and they're definitely not representing us. So that's what we've got to do, and that's what we've got to say to people, and I think that's the way to get the vote up. Fear. I think we need to confront these people actually, and what I will say, and there are people in this room who know this and have been out with me, I am somebody who will have that conversation with people on the doorstep. Look me in the eye and tell me that you're going to vote UKIP, who are just as racist as the BNP. Look at me and tell me why you are going to vote UKIP or the BNP. Because actually, immigration and immigrants in this country actually make this country a much richer, better place to live. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't the fact that my parents immigrated from both Africa and India, and my grandfather came over in the 60s as well to work. And they've always worked, and they've worked hard. So actually I think we do have to talk to them about this, and actually when you get down to it, and I've said it before as well, it's not anything other than jobs, housing, economy. They're the things that matter, and actually when you say to them, but it matters to me as well. So I'm not, my relatives, we haven't come in here, we're not taking any of those things out. It's the things that concern everybody, so I think that's what we have to do. And in terms of getting our vote out, encourage people to sign up to postal votes. I mean, it's a fantastic way of doing things, but once they've signed up, it's actually making sure they go and put it in the letterbox, because they don't always go and do that either. In terms of the ESF funding, I think one of the comments I'm going to make is it's not just the ESF funding. I think one of the criticisms of the European Union is it's very bureaucratic. And that, it's not just how do we simplify the ESF. I think my role as a Labour MEP would be to go and lobby and try and simplify some of these things, because actually it's not encouraging small charities and organisations to actually apply for any of the grants. Nobody knows anything about how you get it, what happens, how much money you can get. Like you say, everybody knows about the lottery funding, because that's actually much more simple. So I think simplify red tape generally in the EU to actually free up some of that funding, and I think we might actually get somewhere.
The burden that's being left to our children and grandchildren of both global warming, climate change that is,
Yep.
and the big debt that we have.
An ongoing campaigning issue, because it's not sort of just happened yesterday, and it's not going to stop happening next year. And I think that's where Europe will have a very key role to play. I mean, already speaks up on a European-wide level. And if it's all very well saying that the UK might make some differences in terms of carbon emissions and things like that, but if Europe as a united front is trying to actually do all those differences, that's the only way that we're going to then persuade the likes of India, China, Brazil, the US to actually come with us. Because half the problem is, we can do it, but if we don't get some of those emerging economies to start doing the same thing, then we are in big trouble, and that's where I would be campaigning forwards. In terms of the debt crisis, I believe we've got a deficit crisis, not necessarily a debt crisis. I think the globe has always been in some form of debt, and I don't have an issue with that. But I think one of the ways that we can actually tackle it is looking at tax evasion of big corporations. The amount of money that is not being paid into the UK economy and the global economy by big corporations. I think we need to tackle that in order to actually maybe tell our children, grandchildren something slightly different, but I don't think that it's a campaigning issue. I think it's corporate taxation that I would be campaigning for.
No one's mentioned anything about web content and things like that, and obviously we're 4 years down the line from last time. Is that something that's going to be pumped up much more? Because that's something we can spread all over Facebook, because that's where people are, and they do enjoy arguing about immigration and things like that on social media, depending on how many friends of that persuasion you have. But that's a real good way to sort of target and address specific arguments, and you can have videos of you all, because I think you're all really good candidates. Is that something that we're going to do more of this time?
I actually think we should. And I'm going to go on a personal thing to say I have a campaign website that hopefully people have looked at. I have a YouTube channel as well, which I've actually utilised to communicate with the Labour Party electorate. I've used it actually in the past as well when I stood in my general election campaign to reach out to some of the younger voters who want to see, be engaged. I think slightly differently to the traditional leaflet in the door, because actually, like you say, most people don't look at them and they get chucked in the bin, which is unfortunate. I think we should also be utilising Facebook more, Twitter more, which I do anyway, to actually get debate going on, because I think one of the biggest problems that we're facing is how we engage younger voters. We can't actually address things like voter turnout until we start engaging with younger generation, make it a bit more exciting, more relevant to their lives. So I will obviously be feeding back to the Labour Party, because we're not going to be making all of the decisions ourselves, but I think that is something that we should take forward.
I'd probably call it a night for the Hustings. In 30 seconds or less, what is your life outside of politics?
What do I do in my spare time? I've also never worked in politics. I've generally worked, for private companies. But what I do love doing, I love travelling. I'm also a very good cook, but I am the granddaughter of 2 professional chefs. My mother has catered for 1,000 people before, so but I won't say I'm as good as her. What I really love doing is seeing my family. My family live 200 miles away, so they're all up there actually. I've helped my brother open a fish and chip shop last year. And I love to go out with my friends, have some cocktails and hit the dance floor. And I'll be doing it at the end when these hustings are going.